are. It's Wednesday Live. Yes, and we've got Karla Chin, somebody who I deeply admire. The work that you do and the person that you are is exceptional. And I appreciate you taking time to talk with us about well-being, because you are the total well-being director at Exude.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Shannon. I've been a fan of yours. Before we even met through Nani, I've seen you around and only heard wonderful things. So it's actually quite an honor to be here.
Thank you.
A little bit of background. So prior to Exude, I joined Exude about 5.5 years ago. So prior to that, I actually had a private practice out here in South Jersey with an integrative medical facility. So I worked with 2 physicians, and it did a little bit more clinical work around lifestyle coaching, nutritional management. So it was more clinical work in that regard. And then as part of that, and also part of my journey, I started realizing that when I allowed my clients or patients at the time to talk, to give them that space to actually be human and share some of their experiences versus rushing them, there was a correlation, because I worked with 2 physicians, in terms of their healing and improvement, right? Whether it's blood pressure metrics, right? Weight loss. A lot of my clients also had PTSD because I worked with many veterans at the time. And so it was such a good opportunity to learn about what's different about us as humans, but also what's so similar and what we have in common. And so it's that human piece that really stuck with me. And through working with all those clients, it was almost organic. We worked with leaders that are patients, right? So they're starting to say, Karla, why don't you come to our office and do this kind of work? Our employees need it. They're giving me junk food all the time, or our lifestyles aren't always good in the workplace. So, a light bulb moment for me was, wow, I'm sending these individuals back to the workplace where, we spend most of our day in pre-COVID, obviously, right? In that space.
Yeah.
And how that influences their behaviors and choices. And so, I started doing a little bit more workshops, coaching in organizations, and then did a little more training and education around well-being in the workplace and culture, and then really loved it, right? Because I started finding that you can create these champions, you can create more of that contagion of positivity in the workplace, and then fast forward to 5.5 years earlier from now, I connected with Exude. Again, I don't remember. It was like one night on a Saturday, I was Googling something, and then the website showed up, and I just resonated with the mission, right? We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. We're very mission focused. Our whole service model is about people, right? And so I just felt like I could actually see myself collaborating, partnering with this organization. Met with Marcos Lopez, our CEO, like a day later after I emailed him on a Sunday night. I emailed him, Monday I was there, and we had coffee and met the team. It's such a great group of people, and I just felt like I was at home. So many negotiations later in terms of partnerships, it was clear, like I can actually see myself parking my business, which it's like a child, right? You grow that child. It's like very conflicting, but the opportunity to reach more organizations was really what attracted me here. And so now we have hundreds of organizations we serve, right? And I have the opportunity to just walk in at this point because we have relationships now established, right? They could be other service line clients, whether it's benefits, human capital, risk management, or retirement. And so what we do at Exude is mutually reinforcing. So when we have all these different service lines where we're serving them in these areas, right, it's the same kind of experience, right? And so when we're talking about well-being, I'm doing consulting work around creating a culture of well-being for organizations. So that could be looking at the entire life cycle of the employee experience, right? From recruitment to exit, right? Not just, like little random programs and wellness challenges, but really looking at the stealth opportunities that you can impact well-being in an organization. And then we do training and development and coaching as well. So I love my job. I'm really grateful that I get to do what I do.
Yes, and you sound perfectly fit for that, and bravo to them for seeing your talent and how that could be a benefit to your clients and customers. Because I do love Exude's mission, where it's all about people and that your mission is our mission. So you're a perfect fit, and thanks for making time to connect with us today, because we all need a little Karla in our lives. And you can help us to understand something that all of us have in common, which is our emotions, emotional courage. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's not the easiest to discuss. Let's just put it that way, right? As far as how we even got to this discussion, and even in organizations when I'm bringing in to a training, for example, a lot of times organizations are looking for stress management or some sort of training around that. And I started realizing, throughout many of these opportunities, that if I didn't just go right into talking about emotions and understanding our belief systems around emotions and just giving them techniques, whatever interventions are out there, we would be missing something so foundational that is essential for awareness, right? To be able to manage that stress. So when I think of emotional courage, it's like building your muscles, right? You're going to the gym, but it's being able to view your emotions as simply data and information, right? Having that lens of curiosity and not avoiding discomfort, right? So maybe there are times where it's just going to be really uncomfortable, but building courage to me is being willing to just sit in it, similar to like a mindfulness practice where you're quiet and you're watching your thoughts pass by and you're not judging it.
Right.
How can we practice mindfulness in action when we're in that discomfort and not judging it as this is happening to me? I can't believe, fill in the blank is sort of in my circumstance right now, but rather being curious. And that is so essential, right? Because when we don't sit in that discomfort, we lose the learning. And the gift is really what I believe is hidden, beneath all of the messiness of those feelings and discomfort.
I totally agree with that. And I think that is one of the benefits, silver lining, positives that's coming out of COVID, is that we are forced to be quiet or less busy. We're not running off to the airport or juggling meetings or, commuting and talking and texting. And, we're doing those things, but we're not as busy physically. So it could enable us to be more thoughtful and mindful and quiet and introspective and self-reflective. I'm saying it could because I think some people have opted to maintain busy, or because they're juggling now working from home and homeschooling kids and being the head of the household and caring for their elderly parents and all of that, they're not seeing this as much as maybe I might say I have opportunities to be more quiet than I had been before. So how do you see the relationship between current events, coronavirus, social distancing, staying safe at home, all of that, and this opportunity to be introspective and self-reflective?
I think it's the perfect opportunity that we're in right now, because even though we are slowing down, it's also triggering a lot of, uncertainty. There's volatility, right? There's fears that are getting activated that otherwise maybe wouldn't have if we didn't have a pandemic going on right now, and, racial equity and all the things that are compounding, right, as a result, right? So I know that it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and I do want to share before I forget, and I want to make sure we covered this, is that self-compassion is essential as well, right? And during this time. So when we're talking about emotional courage, it can be an opportunity not necessarily to just feel it, but have compassion for yourself when you're feeling like, I'm a total failure as a mom right now because I told you my daughter missed her Zoom meeting this morning, and whatever else is going to happen and whatever else happened yesterday, I made a microwavable dinner, right? And so expectations are obviously part of that as well, right? And so it's really looking at this experience as micro opportunities to gain and build that emotional courage, but also practice self-compassion, because without self-compassion, it's difficult to foster emotional agility, emotional courage, right? Resiliency, right? Because it's so much about our relationship with ourselves as well.
And how can we be more emotionally self-compassionate? And for those of you who are on, please write notes in the chat or Q&A for questions that you have for Karla, things like this. Because when you say practice self-compassion, I think I understand that, but I know you understand it more. So what can you teach us about that and how to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately understand it because I've had to really understand it from a survival perspective, right? In terms of my own personal journey of being at war with myself for so many years. And it came in different ways, right? I think you evolve and your interpretation and practice of self-compassion may also evolve, right? So if you typically don't feel like you have a very healthy relationship with yourself, I would say trust is the foundation, right? So just like any kind of relationship, intimate, professional, right, friends that you might have, trust would be a glue to keep those relationships together and healthy. And so self-trust is where I started practicing putting a lot of my energy and making sure that if I'm going to say I'm going to commit to something for myself, I would follow through, and making sure I'm setting goals that I'm allowing myself to be able to succeed. So it could be, let's use the typical example of like working out, right? And so a lot of people will probably say, I want to work out 5 days a week, even though I haven't worked out in 6 months, right? And so I'm a big fan of micro goals and ridiculously easy goals, to the point where it's like, am I selling myself short here? I can do a little bit more, but like, no. I'm good. I know how my brain works, and my brain doesn't like to get overwhelmed. And I want to make sure my integrity is high with myself. And so a lot of the self-compassion does correlate with your accountability, right? With self-accountability and following through, not just for others, because we're really excellent usually with that, right? If you want to do something for someone, you're there. But what about you? And so if I'm saying I'm going to make sure I nourish myself or drink water today, that needs to be as important as, your dream job interview that you might have at 2:00, right? And so it needs to be prioritized in that way.
That's beautiful.
Become important, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we are creatures of habit. I write about it in this book, Vibe. The E section is all about energy management. And in there, we talk about how 5% of our behavior is self-regulated conscious behavior, hence the 5-degree principle, which is all about small changes, because we just can't expect ourselves to take these quantum leaps successfully and consistently. So those micro steps, I think, is a really important thing. And then you're restoring your trust. I've never thought of it like that. That's such a great way to look at it, because you're saying, if I say I'm going to do something for myself and I follow through, that's a way for me to prove my own integrity and that what I say to myself is true. So I guess that would also work in the self-talk mode, right?
Right. And then if you think about the impact on your self-confidence, right? Because your competence increases, right? Because it feels like I'm following through, I'm making strides, I'm achieving, right? So it could be, like I said, it could be 15 minutes of a workout twice a week, which actually was one of my strategies in a few years ago after I gave birth to my second child. I just wanted to get back into the flow. And I had like 5 days a week kind of regimen going on before that, up until 2 days before my delivery, actually. And so in my mind, I can do 5 days, like an hour a day or whatever it is. But I knew that I'd be setting myself up for again, disappointment and breaking that trust. Expectations, again, making sure that I was realistic with what I can do. And so I said 15 minutes, 2 times a week, right? Minimum. If I would do more, all good. And obviously what happens when you work for 50 minutes, usually you end up doing more, right? Because it does fly by, but then you build from that. And then another piece that I wanted to make sure I covered with self-compassion. So in addition to, the trust and self-trust piece, is it's really about those moments. So talking about emotions too, right? When we're feeling really crappy, right? Like when you're just having a horrible day, those are the golden moments where you can truly establish that, like, self-trust, self-compassion is to not kick yourself when you're already down. And it is so easy to do that because no one's listening usually. And it's, if you talk that way to your friend in public, like the way that we talk to ourselves when we're having a horrible day, you'd be put on like the front page of the news. Your brand, right, would be completely like
gone.
Forget it.
Yeah, but we do it all the time.
We do it all the time, and we think it's
I love what you're saying. And like, what do you think are the reasons why we don't allow ourselves to really feel what we're feeling, or that we don't allow ourselves to be more curious and view it as data rather than judgment, or like, I should just get over it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is a good opportunity to even have those who are on right now. I'd love for you to reflect on this, thought right now, as far as, what beliefs did we adopt growing up about negative emotions and expressing it? Right? Were you allowed to safely express when you had big feelings as a child, right, or an adolescent even, right? And so it could be societal messages, it could be cultural messages, right? It could be gender based as far as ability to express, just be a good girl, Karla, right? For example, I know for myself, and this is why, Shannon, I don't know if we talked about this, but this is one of the reason I'm very passionate about this topic and facilitating on this discussion around emotions, is that I had realized, through this work, that I was not able to express my inability to be able to feel safe to express big emotions as a child. Developed a lot of the challenges I had, health challenges. I battled an eating disorder for over 10 years, right? Because it wasn't necessarily your typical case of like body image challenges.
Sure.
It was my coping. It was my socially acceptable to eat, right? And so that was my good girl coping, because I knew drugs were bad, right? So I knew my parents like programmed me to know that don't go there. And it was scary for me to even explore other kind of avenues of coping. But food was my safety. And so I that was the way I suppressed. And so growing up, I was either shamed, sometimes beaten, right? Physically abused if I had big emotions. And that's also how my parents were raised and their parents. And I wasn't allowed to have a voice, right? If I said anything remotely, like when you think of sassy, right? Those words as girls, it's like, oh no, that's not tolerable at all. And so those feelings I didn't have an opportunity to process, but it also led to physical challenges. So, I think it's important to note that our emotions get stored in our body. It's actually physical experiences. So from a well-being lens of health and longevity, immunity, and total well-being, like when we're not processing those emotions, those traumas, those micro traumas or large traumas actually gets stored in our organs, our lymphatic system, right? So that's why processing it and knowing how to kind of move through it is really going to be important, not just for your mental emotional well-being, but your physical well-being.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that with us and reminding us that that's what happens, and that's what we do when we push things down. They go somewhere, they don't just go away.
Yeah.
And for some of us, it's like sweep it under the rug, but there's such a mountain underneath that rug that we trip over or have to leap over every day, but we like just don't want to deal with it. And so what would you recommend for those who don't have a therapist, right? So who haven't practiced, because I think one of the benefits of therapy is that you have to practice expressing yourself and practice putting words to things that you don't even know are there sometimes, right? Until you start to shine a light in those dark places. But for those who don't have that, or maybe just in addition to therapy that they've been reaching out for, how do you recommend we lean into this and allow ourselves to be uncomfortable?
So a couple of ways, right? One could be journaling, right? So if some people either love it or, just have an aversion to it, I find. So give it a chance if it's something that maybe feels a little intimidating to write things out. But there's been a lot of studies correlating, trauma patients, even students that have, been asked to journal about some of their traumas for even just as short as, 15 minutes a day. And how that ended up, correlating to less doctor visits for sick visits, higher immune levels, right? And so just processing it is really key. And so that's actually the intervention that worked really well for me, is and I've gone through therapy and other modalities as well, but I think, the integrative approach is important. I just personally like to journal. I've always journaled since I was a young child. And that's actually how I cold turkey ended the eating disorder that I was battling for so many years. Is I had like the eve, this is actually an interesting story I'll share, the eve of a birthday of mine. It was my 24th. This was a while ago. I wrote, a apology letter to myself. I don't know, I just felt compelled to do that. And I journaled about it in terms of like the harm and just, not being there for myself and all of these things. And then after that, I wrote a promise letter, like I journaled about it in terms of my commitment to myself. So again, it was sort of just came to me as far as an idea, and it felt really appropriate, but writing it felt healing in a way. So journaling could be one way. And then also when I talked about feeling those big feelings or discomfort, I mean, we don't have to start with the big feelings, right? We could start with boredom. we could start with little feelings, like you're just a little agitated after turning on the news, right? And you're starting to feel your emotions shifting, right, towards the negative. And sometimes I'll tell my clients to set their timer, so you can use your smartphone. 30 seconds, let me just sit in this. 1 minute, let me sit in this. And so you build, right, your tolerance. And what happens is that you start realizing, oh, I got through that, right? And so again, you have that reference point, right, as far as experience, to be able to then go and experience it again next time. So those, I think, are maybe more realistic ways. I mean, obviously there's other interventions out there, but I do think that those ones resonate well with the clients that I work with.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then I think it could also be a document of your successes, or like, just because I think sometimes, like in a time like this, where there's so much uncertainty and there's so much like sadness and confusion and shame and feelings, a lot of feelings right now. We could just blow right past that, or we could remember the times in our life that we have felt similar emotions, or maybe have been in similar situations, and like either what worked or what didn't work. How did I handle it then? What did I make it mean then? Because maybe I used to make it mean that I'm weak, and now I make it mean that I'm human. So I just think like having some kind of a record of those things helps us to see, like, we've been on the planet for a while. It doesn't mean that we know everything. It just means we have experience that we could leverage. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So for emotional courage, as we're in this, like, we'll call it like going to the gym of our feelings and working out. So journaling is something that we could do. What are other things that we could do?
So journaling, and I mentioned, a very simple practice of in the moment, just feeling it and setting some boundaries around it, right? So rather than full time, I'm going to do it. Let me try 30 seconds. Let me try 1 minute. And so for those who actually practice meditation, it's really not that different in that you're experiencing the sensations in your body, you're witnessing what's happening. I think I always like to tune into your physical sense. So, building emotional courage is also being in tune with your body, right? So that, in addition to the journaling, but also getting, being aware. So when I start to feel stressed, and bigger feelings, I know it's my throat, right? It's this area of my body. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating because I can't speak, right? Have a difficult time getting my words out. And so that would be like a homework assignment for next time you experience some sort of, emotion that, causes anxiety or stress. Where is it showing up in your body, right? Because that could help you get more present, tune in, right? And then being a little bit more curious as far as what's happening. Another way to kind of process it and engage your higher brain in the experience of emotions would be to remember that emotions, like I said, are data. It's just information, and it tells you about two things, right? It tells you about your needs. Right? So if you're feeling joy and gratitude, then chances are you have some needs that are getting met, right? They're needs that are not that are being fulfilled and met. You're feeling anger, frustration, or even boredom. There's obviously a need that's happening that's not getting met. So you could even be as simple as a physiological need, Shannon. So you may have been in meetings in the past where you start feeling hangry, and then suddenly you're starting to find yourself feeling a little irritable, right? Like maybe you're like, hurry up, let's wrap this up. Let's go. And if we're sometimes so caught in the moment that we don't realize that it's actually physiologically, if something physiological is not getting met. So in that situation, you could also reflect, like, what need am I not getting met? Right, I haven't eaten breakfast. It's 1 o'clock right now. I haven't even hydrated. Makes sense that I would be, getting irritated. Or it could be you're in a meeting and you're feeling like you're not being validated. Or you're being glossed over, right? That need to feel like you matter and that you're seen is is not getting met, right? And so that's one of the things. And then the other one would be values, which I know you do a lot of work around as well, right? So when people are aware of their personal values, then it becomes easier to look at it from a lens of what information is this giving me, right? So family is a high value, autonomy or integrity is a high value. In those situations where they're not getting met, it makes total sense that I would feel frustrated. And so now you take in the compassion piece and you can validate yourself and say, gosh, Karla, like it's completely normal that you would feel so ashamed right now, given that, you know, this value is not you're not living up to this, and that, and you feel like you're a total failure, right? Or
Yes.
X, Y, and Z. So it just helps you kind of dim the switch a little bit.
Yes.
It doesn't feel so intense. So it doesn't take the problem away, but you're able to navigate it. You're able to find solutions because you're not so attached to the story of what happened and why it's happening.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So I wanted to hear more about when you talked about the upbringing, like how you were raised and then how their parents were raised and their parents were raised. I just wonder how this cycle continues with this work, and, you know, what can we learn about, you know, just the circumstances with which we were brought up, assuming everybody was doing the best they can with what they have. And I think that's, in most cases, a good assumption.
Yes.
You know, how does that play a part in what you're talking about right now, which is this like understanding it, giving yourself the right to just, you know, learn more about yourself?
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. I want to highlight the point that, you know, all parents are trying to do the best that they can given what they have, and there is that ancestral, right, part of, you know, how we evolved, how we're programmed, how even in our DNA, right, that's science, right, as far as how we inherit characteristics, you know, disease, illness, or immunity, right, all of that does get passed on, but also our emotions and thoughts
And our beliefs, right?
Yeah, and our beliefs. And so I had learned a lot about this during my first pregnancy with my now 8-year-old, because I was immersed in a lot of this work, especially during that time. And I started reading and learning about how my fears, even during pregnancy, can be passed on to my child. And so this is like pre that, I was trying to do a lot of this clearing and making sure that whatever I can do to be able to prevent the continuation of sort of that passing down. And so obviously, you know, our brains are so malleable that even as an adult, you can still reprogram, but it does take awareness and willingness to look at that stuff, which sucks, right? Like it just is not fun to have to look at that ickiness and have to, you know, give yourself some truth bombs and like, okay, like, yeah, I got to sort through all this. But it's so worth it, right? Because you get to sort of define yourself in a way that, you know, is truly you, and pave the road in whatever way you feel is most appropriate. And so I do feel like I was living with, you know, like handcuffs for a long time, and just, you know, a product of my environment and upbringing. And if you look at my family and just even, you know, my current generation and my parents' generation, like I'm a bit of an anomaly, right, in terms of what I do. Speaking with you, this is being recorded, it's going to be online. I mean, it'd be so opposing to what I was raised to believe. I was supposed to be quiet and just, you know, blend in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what are you learning? Because I think the lessons that you have been learning about parenting, I think also apply to lessons in leadership, which is how can we create an environment where this is okay? Because I know that sometimes, again, with good intentions, I deeply believe that people are doing the best that they can with what they know or what they've seen. But, you know, sometimes people will say, it's not that bad. Or, you know, you seem a little emotional. Why don't you take a breath and come back when you can think clearly? Or, you know, you just have to suck it up and deal, because this is just the way it is, right? And so any kind of a invalidation of a feeling, so we might unintentionally do that to our children, we might do that to our colleagues and employees. Like how have you learned, and you know, you're teaching this in the workplace, so like how can we make a space for emotions at work?
So it does start with self-leadership, right? And just a lot of my focus right now is working with organizations in individuals and leaders, managers, especially taking responsibility. So the self-awareness piece, understanding some of their triggers, and that they're in a meeting and a direct report is having, I mean, a lot of this stuff, discussions happening right now where everyone's struggling with their current circumstances, and how are they responding to some of those needs not being met in their teams, right? And that can be triggering some of their own. So a lot of the work that you do obviously does speak to this as well. But when I go into organizations in an engagement, it's very clear that our whole goal is to help humanize the organization, right? Rehumanize it maybe, right? It was feeling human before. And when in my work, we talk a lot about empathy. We talk a lot about how to foster empathy. A lot of people don't realize that it's a skill you develop. There's a judgment that you're either a nice person or you're not a nice person, right? Based on our experience, but everyone is capable of empathy, and a lot of empathy development and sort of growing that skill is emotions, right? And understanding your own emotions and being able to then correlate that with social awareness as well. Because if I'm aware of my emotions, then I am more likely to be aware of your emotions, Shannon, or someone else's. And so there is a lot of that discussion around validation, listening, and there's that term, I don't know if you've heard about it lately, I've been seeing it posted a lot, called toxic positivity. Right. So I there's work on around that as well, that, rather than, pretending everything's great, or you should, people are in losing jobs and, comparing ourselves to other people that are obviously struggling, which is very true. It's understanding that every person's experience is valid. So sure, they may seem like life should be good and they shouldn't complain, but in that human's experience, if you just stepped in their shoes, that's a big deal. And I learned that work when I was in my one-on-one practice, because I had such a wide range of clients. So I had clients that, had billion-dollar companies, literally, right? And I worked with their whole family, the daughters, the wives, the aunts, right? And so I learned a lot about their stressors. And I also worked with, like I said, veterans. I worked with single moms. And because, as a coach, you're taught to not have that lens of judgment and just, listen. I started realizing that all their challenges were valid for them, right? So hearing the billionaire's challenge versus, from a veteran lens, right, might be triggering. But you know what? Actually was very valid for that client. And so I think as a manager in leadership, understanding that you may not know what it's like to be in that situation, but it doesn't mean that it's not valid for that person. And so sometimes listening in itself, we talk about mindful listening in some of the work I'm doing, and also I'm sure you do as well, but it's not so much about what you say, but it's also just hearing them and being there and acknowledging that whatever they're going through is not your problem to solve.
Sure.
You're just there to be empathetic in that moment and have that compassion. So it's difficult, right? Because when our needs aren't met, it's really difficult to be empathetic. And so that goes back to self-leadership. Right. How can I be empathetic when my cup is not full?
Yes.
My needs aren't getting met, so sorry, I don't have enough to give you right now. is sort of what we're in, right?
Without a doubt, yes.
So it's no wonder that people are having challenge with this.
I agree. And do you believe that even when your cup is not full, you can still effectively empathize with others about their cups?
Depends. I think it depends how empty your cup is. And it also depends on the individual you're connecting with. So if it was my best friend who I adore and love, and we, like effortless to have a conversation, I'm sure I could. But if it was a very challenging employee, that already triggered me, and I've developed assumptions about this individual and interpretations, then that's difficult, because that means I have to sort through my stuff to be even have that bridge to connect with them.
Yeah. So that's deeper, harder work to do.
And that's part of the self-awareness piece as leaders. It's really essential of knowing what's going on with you. And sometimes we project it onto other people thinking that they're the problem. Meanwhile, they can't hear you. you can't hear them because we're both in our own little containers and we can't cross.
And I want to get to the emotional triggers of the most recent past, which is all of the reaction and just the tragedy of losing George Floyd, and how that has really been a catapult, I hope, for change in the US. So I want to get to that. But before we go there, I want to hear your thoughts on taking things personally. Because I think that's something, at the moment, there's all women on the call. That's something that I find more so something women do, but I think all of us do it, where we interpret, meaning men and women, interpret things as something about us. What do you know about that?
Can I actually read you something? This is so appropriate because I saw something and I was going to share it in a session for tomorrow. So it's on
great. Yes, please.
I'll read it to you. Okay. So this is actually so timely. So it says, every time you find yourself arguing with someone, remind yourself that you're not actually arguing with the person. You're arguing with their story, their experiences, their fears, their unconscious biases, their conditioning, their triggers, their trauma, their needs. Choose to be curious. All right. And so that kind of brings me to the point I wanted to share. And this has been really helpful for me because I've been a recovering people pleaser for many years. Not taking things personally was a huge challenge for me. But looking at it when I now connect with others, and I've gone from I don't want feedback because it's too painful to hear to give me feedback because I want to learn. And how that shift happened was when I started realizing that when people speak from their perspective, and it's really, again, all of that coming to play, their experiences, their upbringing, their belief systems, right? And so how they're going to see it is never going to be the way I'm going to see it, but we can find some value and maybe there's feedback there that could be really good. So, I think that's helpful versus they're out to get me and they're out to piss me off right now.
Or I'm not enough.
Or I'm not enough.
They just proved to me that I'm not. Yeah.
Right. So if someone's going to attack you, and I've been attacked, from different ways, maybe passively, directly, it could be because of my race, right? And I've just learned to be able to say, okay, and this is where the empathy piece comes. It's like, wow, what's going on with that person? I wonder what's going on. And there's another quote that's really powerful. You may use it as well in your work. And it says, hurt people hurt people. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
And that's amazing because, I know I hurt people when I'm hurt, and I do it in more socially acceptable ways, right?
Yeah.
A little bit like more short with my emails or, my communication, but we all have a need that we need to get met. And if we're hurt, typically that comes out in ways that, can be easily taken as personal.
And what is the need there when we do that kind of thing and we don't care, or we even retaliate, so maybe sometimes it's like we deliberately hurt people. Sometimes I think when we're hurt, we don't mean to, but we just carry there's a weak in our path. What is the need that isn't being met then?
In that, so, and then going back to the emotion piece, right, of like, obviously when we're hurt, that's a emotion that's being experienced. So when you think about exactly what you said, what need am I not getting met right now? It could be anything in that situation, right? So I think this might be a good segue to even what we wanted to make sure we covered, right, as far as let's make sure we had enough time to go there. But a lot of emotions are obviously, people are hurt, and it's like going back to permission to be human, right? It is completely normal to be hurt, right? Now, the way it comes out would depend on our ability to, our ways that we've learned to cope, our ways that feels best for us to release. And we're always trying to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So sometimes that, reactive hurt, action that we take towards someone, perhaps, it could be like a social media post that you just post out there. It could just be a sense of momentary relief, right? So it's sort of the quick Band-Aid fix. And it feels good. So it's really our agenda to sort of feel a little bit better in that situation. May not always be the sustainable route if we're not getting to the root cause of what that need is. But that's why the reflection piece is really key. So even if you've already done the action, which,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can agree as a parent, we've taken the lower road sometimes in terms of
Yeah.
our conversations with our kids. You will always have a chance to go back and reflect. So just because you didn't do it well that one time,
Mhm.
that's another opportunity to say, whoa, okay, that went a little far. But
Yeah.
what need did I not get met? What value maybe didn't get met in that moment
Mhm.
too?
Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. So I think that's great introspection. And now, I mean, now is a time where I think we're all feeling a lot of things, and we could justify it, we could self-medicate it, we could ignore it, we could just get busy, or we could sit in it and learn about it and say, what is that teaching me about now? So this is a moment in time in history where I can't imagine there's a single person on this planet that doesn't have a really heightened sense of emotion, a range of emotion. What do you know about that? Like how does that look through your experienced lens?
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting and why this is coming to light right now is that we typically don't like to focus on the negative emotions, right? And so now that there's a heightened opportunity to
Yeah.
experience it, um, I see it from a lens of, wow, this is the best learning opportunity right now to grow and to evolve as an individual, as a society, as a nation, right? And so um, not we talked about feeling some of the discomfort and sitting in that, but I do want to make sure we also know that you can sit in the joys and the gratitude as well, right? And so looking at the spectrum, the buffet table of range of emotions, and being able to play in it a little bit. So not, it's easy to embrace the joyous moments because I want to just stay there forever,
Yeah.
but embracing it, savoring it, but also being in the down, the lows, and being able to also see it from a lens of curiosity.
Hmm.
And then again, data, right? Like, be like a scientist. Like, what is this telling me, right? Like,
Yeah.
what information can I use to grow? What information can I take from this to take action that's going to be in alignment with my values,
Yeah.
perhaps?
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's like where I'm at with this, because I've been so for I should have thought more about the words to use, because I know that some of them are really simple words like sad
Yeah.
and confused and um shameful. Like I feel shame a lot lately, and I'm learning more about like why, because I'm learning that I have a role to play, a role that I needed to play more significantly than I had. And I wasn't aware of that until recently. And I feel responsible for that. And so my new way of feeling about that is like, I thought about this laying in bed last night, because another night where I couldn't sleep. And I thought, I don't really feel uh, comfortable being at rest until everyone is comfortable being at rest, right? I feel like, for the mothers and fathers of our Black and brown friends and family who can't sleep at night because their children are being targeted, I'm like, that's a problem all of us have. So I am much more, as these weeks have gone on and I've been learning and I've been really like sitting in it and feeling really uncomfortable about it, is I'm like, I need to stay uncomfortable until I have evidence that there's actual change, and that these burdens that are on these families have been, you know, God willing, alleviated, if not just reduced or significantly managed, and that there is more justice. So I feel this unrest, and I don't know how to feel any differently than that.
Yeah. Right. And that's completely human. And I'm sure, those who are here can probably relate to that. I know I can certainly relate to what you just shared.
Yeah.
And we have completely different life experience, I'm sure. Right. And so
Yeah.
going back to, whatever everyone is going through, regardless of your role in this world and your experience and your background or
Mhm.
ethnicity, right? It's real for you, right? Regardless of your views, even, right? We
Yeah.
can even go there.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're feeling is important data. And also, I think right now, Shannon, what you had mentioned about the sadness and the shame and maybe some of the grief that's going on around as well, right? As far as these feelings, those are really important to feel, because that's usually what drives us to take action and change something, right? Because
Yes.
you can sit in it and not learn anything, or learn something, and process it but not take action. But usually, for when you process it enough, you get
Mhm.
inspired. Your
Yes.
brain starts expanding, right? Because when you come from a lens of curiosity, right, you want to learn, you want to
Yes.
grow, right, versus stuck in the story and
Mhm.
feeling like you can't do anything about it, right? And so now it gives you a sense of agency, because you're like, oh, interesting. And that's kind of where my brain's been going, of like opportunities and just a little bit of brainstorming. And I
Mhm.
feel it, but I'm not attached to it. And I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? What do I need to learn about? I've learned a lot in the last week, even just as a Filipino, in terms of colonialism, and how, even just my programming culturally, and how I might be contributing to this issue, right? Like just my upbringing. And so
Yeah.
things I would never, like in this time of the month or this time of the year, like there's a lot going on in my life too, that I just wouldn't have thought that would be one of the things that I'd be prioritizing right now.
Sure.
But that's what happens when you feel that sadness, when you're feeling that collective grief and
Mhm.
and anger, all that kind of converging.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what you said earlier about how it goes back to your values,
Yeah.
like that's one of the indicators or one of the places to get curious. And having done that work too, that's always a place that I go to for information. And so, like, my number one value is love. My second value is compassion. My third is curiosity, right? And then on that list somewhere is responsibility. And then I also have a value for fun and humor, like levity.
Yeah.
So I haven't found that quite yet. But when you talked about social media posts, there was one that literally brought me to tears yesterday. And if I pulled it up right now, I would probably just start. I always say that tears is just your heart coming out of your eyes,
Right.
where it was a group of people that were doing a peaceful protest. And it was, Black people, white people, police officers, all kinds of people. And they were doing the electric slide
Oh,
together.
yeah, I saw that.
And I was just like, I felt like Martin Luther King being like, this is the dream. This is it. This is what
Yeah.
it looks like. And so I bring that back to say, like, oh, it was just so much joy when you just said you can feel both, you can
Yeah.
sit in both.
Yeah.
I thought that was so helpful to see, like, we already are seeing a sign of progress. Will that be sustainable? That's the big question. But the fact that it even happened, and it wouldn't happen probably 3 weeks ago, to me is like, it's validating, it's hope providing, right?
Yeah.
It's like a rest stop or a water stop on a marathon where you're like, keep going, right? So I thought that was really interesting, that, like, to kind of look at your values and then look for those joy moments or
Good.
those gratitude moments. Yeah.
Right, and the good's in there, right? Like, that it's like your brain's really compliant at what you want to look at. So if you want to keep looking at the horrible things that are happening, I mean, we often will miss in our landscape the little blessing that's sprinkled in there, because our
Yeah.
brain is just literally programmed to look at what the common theme of what you've been looking at is, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's
can you program your brain that way? Like, can you intentionally look for
yes,
certain thing? Okay. How,
it's a
how do we do
practice.
that? Because that might be
Um,
helpful for
Yeah,
everybody.
and so that's
If
a lot
everyone
of
has
the work
tips.
I've done in positive psychology, where we're looking at, practices like gratitude, right? Interventions like gratitude, like the three good things, one which I love. Do you
Mhm.
practice that one, the three good
Oh,
things?
yes. Yeah. I wrote a gratitude journal. There's one
Oh,
on its way to you. So
oh,
you'll be
yeah.
getting this. But yeah, it's a one line a day, or you could write three things if you
Right,
want to.
okay,
But yeah,
cool.
the three
So,
good things is a really
three
good
good
practice.
things. And then another layer to that, if you want to deepen the gratitude experience, is to think about how you contributed to those good things happening, right?
Mm,
Because it gives you, again, a sense of agency. So I'm
yeah.
not just sitting around waiting for the good stuff to fall in my lap. You start
Mhm.
realizing, oh, right, I played a role in that conversation. And so
Yes.
that's how you rewire your brain for positivity, right? And then
Mhm.
savoring is another one that I love to do. So looking
Yeah.
at, at the end of the day, like what's one good thing, and even savoring in the moment. If I'm cuddling with my 3-year-old, who just is like such a great cuddler, um,
Mhm.
I just like, it feels like time slows down. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just engaging all your senses into that experience, or you
Mhm.
can relive it because your brain doesn't know that it happened 10 years ago. Right.
Right.
And so, again,
Yes.
you can start
Yeah.
reprogramming
Take
your
yourself
mind
back. Hmm.
to look at for the good. And then you can do the whole gratitude throughout the day. So I play this little game sometimes with myself, especially if it's been a rough week, where, okay, every hour it's like, what's one good thing? And then I kind of throughout the day, okay, what's one other good thing? Do I want to replace it with a previous good thing, or do I want this one? So I kind of weigh it up.
Yeah.
And I, kind of play that. And then how I start our meetings, any meeting and facilitation I have always starts with some sort of positivity boost. How we start our meetings at Exude always starts with some grounding activity of positivity.
Like what? Like, give me an example.
So sometimes we'll just do a minute to arrive, which is really fun. So you just time it for a minute, right? Imagine a board meeting starting this way when everyone's like stressed coming in and running late, right? So you set the timer for a minute and everyone can just either think of something they're grateful for or just take that minute to just literally physically arrive.
Yes.
And it changes the energy. A lot of times I'll prompt people in terms of, think of one strength that you, and I've been using this one a lot. Think of one strength or skill that you've been finding yourself having to nurture or develop more so than other times, right? Given that we're in these circumstances. So thinking about like sort of what's good, what do you have developed could be another one, or one of your happiest experiences or memories, right? So relive that. I'll usually set the timer for a whole minute, then, have people sort of live it, feel it, and then we'll share.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's contagious because emotions are contagious.
Totally contagious. Yeah. And if one person comes in stress and you just like hit the ground running and then everybody's feeling that tension and, I think that's unfortunately for 1 minute, it could really change the game and humanize the circumstance. What is your thought about the one good, one bad? I've been hearing other facilitators using that one, like give me one positive emotion and one.
So I would reframe it if I were going to use that. I would say, you could do one good, one bad, or there's, are you familiar with the sanctuary model? A lot of our nonprofits are certified in it. So you start meetings asking, one of the components is you ask, what do you need right now? And so rather than one good, one bad, you can certainly say, what's one good thing or what do you need support with, right? And so I think it just, again, allows you to, one, reach out and connect. And a lot of times when we've done that in the past, we used to do good or bads in staff meetings. Most of the time, because we have a negativity bias, right? Our brain will more likely lean towards sharing something negative, right? And we also feel like, I don't want to brag about all the good things.
Everything's not so great.
Downplay myself, right? And so,
and if you're stressed and overwhelmed,
I just heard someone's, treat
and the other thing too is I don't even like the word bad because it's like that's saying that feeling that way is bad. It's like you're feeling that way, so
so you could just do like a share, right? Like a human share.
I love that. Those are good practical things that we could bring into our practices, whether we get to share that with a team or we do that with ourselves so we can set our minds straight. I love that savoring, the thinking of three things, the, there's another gratitude strategy, which is the, like where you imagine you don't have something. I'm forgetting the actual words right now, but it's like the absence of something. And I find it's a really easy one to use during coronavirus because there's so many things that you don't get to do anymore that you now have more appreciation for, so you can think about being at the office or being in a meeting or shaking hands with someone or hugging someone. So I think those are really helpful things to think about what you can't wait to get to do. And then, what are some things that you get to do now that you didn't get to do? Like, as hard as it is to homeschool your kids, I'm sure, you don't normally get to sit in class with her. So that's, an opportunity.
And also lastly, I think just as a reframe, and I'm sure have heard of this, it's, how, why is this happening for me? Or what, this is happening for me versus happening to me. And so even just seeing it as, even though it's masked and packaged in adversity and all of this, unpleasantness, like there's a gift here. There's something that I can learn from this. There's something that I can gain. And even, any trauma really does allow an opportunity for growth and evolution, right? So I think that's difficult, but if you're able to get to a place where you can kind of look at adversity, even if it's like a year later, and say, whoa, what did I do? And there is always the case. There's always something there. There's always a blessing.
Agreed. Oh, Karla, thank you. This was so helpful. I really appreciate you investing in us and our minds.
Sure.
bringing this generous gratitude to us. So thank you for the tools, the framework, the insights, and for sharing your experience with us.
My pleasure.